Hey everybody, it's Miss Beckham again. We're going to do today solving quadratics using the quadratic formula. Once again, this is something from Math 1. We are going to add something a little different. We're going to go back and add some simplifying radicals in with these quadratic formula problems. So first of all, it says so far we have solved quadratics by factoring and solving. That's going to be our first thing that I put up here. So something we've already done, factor and solve. That's where you have to do your t-chart, double t-charts, or square box method. Take each one of your factors, set it equal to 0, and solve for your x-intercepts or your zeros or your roots as they are also known. Now the second method we're going to focus on today is going to be using the quadratic formula. If we were in class, I'd be showing you this awesome little cartoon, but unfortunately, we are not there, missing every single one of you. I know that you and I both hope to be back to school soon. So we're going to talk about the quadratic formula. The quadratic formula, you've already seen before, is negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So I have to make sure things are in standard form. Standard form means it has to be in this whole ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. The a is going to be the number in the front attached to the x squared. The b is going to be the number in the middle attached to the x. And the c is going to be the number in the back all by itself. So for us to go ahead and get started, you will need a calculator. So you need to go ahead and make sure that you have your calculator accessible. That means you can use the one that's on your phone. That's not a big deal. We're not going to do anything crazy with the radical or the square root at this point. So on number 1, first thing I need to do, it is not set equal to 0. That negative 3 needs to move to the left. So I'm going to take my pen, get it ready, go ahead and take that negative 3 over. That now becomes 5x squared minus 8x positive 3, and now it's equal to 0. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to label what I know. This is my A, negative 8 is my B, and positive 3 is my C. And I'm ready to put it into the quadratic formula, which means a negative B. So at this point, I'm going to switch it up a little bit with some colors. That means a negative 8. It's negative B. B happens to be negative 8, so it's a negative 8. I know a lot of you are going to turn that positive in just a moment. Plus or minus the square root of negative 8 squared minus 4 times the A times the C number all over 2 times. Oh, let me go back. That is a little haphazard. That line I drew is not looking good. Okay, get back. Great. All over. That's much better. 2 times A. I'm going to go ahead and move my screen down since we've just put that into the quadratic formula. Once again, this should be a review, hopefully, from your Math 1. So at this point, this is what I want you to do. We're going to go to our calculator. We're only going to type in this piece right here. I know it's hard to see with my highlighter. Do not type in the radical. I just want you to do parentheses negative 8 squared minus 4 times 5 times 3. That's all. Your basic calculator can handle that. Remember, there's also calculators available on our Canvas site. When I do that, this is what I'm going to get at this next point. Well, I know a negative 8 really turns into positive 8 plus or minus. Now, when you do the negative 8 squared minus 4 times 5 times 3, you should have got 4. So that becomes the square root of 4 all over 2 times 5 makes 10. You know the square root of 4, it's going to be 2. So I'm going to get 8 plus or minus 2 all over 10. This is something that we can work out. This means I need to do 8 plus 2 divided by 10, solve that. And I also need to do 8 minus 2 divided by 10. If I do that, I'm going to find my 2 zeros, or the 2 places where my quadratic graph will cross the x-axis. When I do 8 plus 2, that's 10. 10 divided by 10 makes 1. I solve the next problem, which is 8 minus 2 is 6. 6 over 10 turns into 3/5. These are the 2 places where my quadratic graph will touch the x-axis using the quadratic formula. Number 2 is going to be a little different. Once again, I need to go ahead and make sure I move that 1 over. So that's going to leave me 9x squared minus 5x minus 1 all equals 0. Need to go ahead and write down what I know about my A and my B very quickly. So this is my A, -5 is my B, and -1 happens to be my C. We're going to plug that in the formula. The formula says a negative B, so -5 plus or minus the square root of B squared, so -5 squared minus 4 times your A times your C all over 2 times A. Once again, not going to do anything crazy. I am going to go to my, see if I can find another color that might help. Don't have a lot of options today. I'm going to take just this part right here. Everybody see it? And put that in my graphing calculator or my calculator or the one on my phone. So I'm doing -5 squared. Remember, that's in parentheses. A -5 times -5 is 25. Then it's going to be -4 times 9 times -1. When I put all that in my graphing calculator, or my calculator, it gives me 61. So a -5 turns it 5. I'm going to go back to my pen. Turns into a +5 plus or minus. So when I did -5 squared minus 4 times 9 times -1, I actually get 61. Unfortunately, we cannot take the square root of 61. I'm going to put 2 times 9 on the bottom, which is 18. I have to think, though, can I simplify 61? Is there anything that perfect square that goes into 61? Try going backwards on perfect squares. Can't use 64. 49 will not go evenly. 36 will not go evenly. 25 not evenly. 16 will not work evenly. 9 will not go evenly. 4. So it is already in simplest form. At this point, this is how I want you to leave your answer. Now, some of you are like, but why? We used to do decimals. Well, we want the exact answer, which means we need to leave the radical there. By the way, 5 and 18 cannot reduce, so that means it's even more so in simplest form. So that would be the location of your 2 zeros. It's not very nice zeros because those are decimals that keep going and going. They're non-terminating. We're going to go to example number 3. So you've had one that works out to be a perfect square number. You can actually square root the 4 on number 1. Number 2, you cannot square root 61. We are not putting things in decimal form, so you need to leave it in simplest radical form. Number 3 is going to be a little different. We're going to scroll up as far as my screen will allow me to go. First thing I'm going to do is I apologize. That 14 should have had a little X beside it, and that was my fault. I need to move it, and it's going to need to move to the middle. I need to keep it in standard form. So very quickly, I'm going to go ahead and write that. That becomes 4x squared minus 14x. When I move it to the middle, +2, all equals 0. I need to label my A, my B, and my C. And I'm ready to go ahead and put this into the quadratic formula, which is -b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times the A times the C all over 2 times A. Some of you are like, oh, you could have taken a GCF. Yes, you sure can. You can take out a GCF and still use quadratic formula. It's just one more step if you really wanted to do that. So at this point, I'm going to go back to my highlighter. I'm only going to put in this part right here. I know it's hard to see with my highlighter. I'm only going to put that part in right there into my graphing calculator or my calculator on my phone or on the computer. Do not put the radical in. It's going to give you a crazy decimal. I can go ahead and tell you that. So when I do -14 squared minus 4 times 2, I get 164. So at this point, this is where I'm going next. I'm going to write this down. So a -14, I'm going to sort of move all that up there. It's going to give me +14 plus or minus the square root of 164 all over 2 times 4, which makes 8 on the bottom. I now need to think about 164. What is 164? Well, is there a perfect square that goes into it? The biggest perfect square that I can think of off the top of my head is 4, and it will go into it 41 times. So I am going to need to break down the square root of 164. When I do that, here's my 14 plus or minus. I know if I take the square root of 4, bring it out, it turns into a 2, but I'm still left with root 41 and still all over 8. Now, if you notice, the numbers on the outside of the radical, 14, 2, and 8, all can be divided. Either they all can be reduced or you leave them exactly the same. So if the 14 and the 8 could be reduced, but there was a number in front of the the square root of 41, which is, say, 3, you cannot reduce it. So right now we're going to leave the way that we're going to leave our answers, rather, I should say right now, we're going to need to reduce that 14, that 2, and that 8. If all 3 can reduce, let's reduce. So I know 14, 2, and 8 are all divisible by 2, so I'm going to reduce everything by 2. When I do so, 2 goes into 14 7 times. Plus or minus 2 goes into 2, 1. You do not need to put the 1 if you really want to. It's not a big deal. I'll put it there in case you want to see it. I cannot reduce the 41. It's underneath the radical. But 2 also goes into 8 4 times. This is your final answer. This would be the location of your 2 zeros of your quadratic graph. Once again, not very nice numbers because those are going to be non-terminating decimals. So we're going to leave it in simplest radical form. If you need help using the quadratic formula, especially now that we're putting it in simplest radical form, please make sure you call me, text me, FaceTime me. Once again, we don't need a fancy calculator because we're not actually taking the square root of those numbers. It's not possible. So give me a call, text, FaceTime, and we can discuss further problems. When you're putting this into your Delta math, should not be an issue. You can use you can make it on, for this example, we could write it separately, 7 plus square root of 41 over 4, and your second answer could be 7 minus square root of 41 over 4. That is how we would write them separately instead of with the plus or the minus. Good luck. Let me know if you need help.